Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a couple, married for 5 years without issues, faces turmoil when the wife develops insomnia. Her odd behavior, late-night outings, and secretive phone calls raise suspicions. Discovering evidence of an affair, the husband confronts her, leading to a breakup. The wife's attempt to enter their home is thwarted by the husband. Police involvement confirms his right to deny her access. In the aftermath, he gains favor in the divorce, securing primary custody of their daughter, ensuring her stability amid the mother's tumultuous relationships. The husband focuses on providing a secure environment for their child. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 24, and I, 26, were married for 5 years without any problems. The problem started with her sudden onset of insomnia. Nothing changed in our life. We still lived in the same home and both still worked the same jobs. She would get home from work a little before me, but instead of coming home to a ready dinner made for the two of us, I came home to her on her phone, laying in bed. She said she already ate and stayed on her phone doing whatever we had. A 2-year-old. At this point, she would usually be playing beside her in the bed, but I started to wonder if my wife was even paying attention to her daughter any more than a babysitter. She started taking walks in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. I woke up and saw she was gone from our bed. So I checked our baby's room, then downstairs, then opened the front door to see if the car was gone. I open it and find her standing there about to come back into the house. She didn't have her keys in her hand and was still wearing her pajamas, so I believed her when she said she couldn't sleep and needed to get some air. Our neighborhood was safe, but I did ask her to try to stay in the house from now on. She didn't. It was several nights in a row that I would stir just as my wife was getting back into bed from God knows where. As I fell asleep each night, she was on her phone. I finally had enough. I asked her to let me see her phone one night just before I fell asleep. She was stunned by my request and said she didn't need to give me her phone. I said if she was a good, loyal wife, there wouldn't be any problem. She was really upset with me now. She said I didn't trust her and she didn't have to stand for this. Before I could stop her, she locked herself in the bathroom with her phone. I thought I heard whispering, but if she did try to call, it was only for a few seconds. Then she came out and threw her phone at me, telling me I could look at it all I wanted because she cleaned off all the evidence. I told her I wasn't the idiot she thought I was, and I knew something was going on. I said if she didn't stop all the odd behavior, I would hire a pie to follow her around. She gasped and said we couldn't afford that. It could be worth the investment. I told her, not. Even 1 week later, I saw an Amazon charge on our account for 2 manly-type gifts. I think maybe, although doubtful, she bought me apology presents. I waited 2 days and found that the packages were delivered, but my wife hid them away before we went to bed that night. I saw charges from gas stations over the past month that we normally wouldn't drive to. She was definitely going somewhere after work, in the middle of the night and possibly during the day when I'd assumed she was working. I stayed awake in bed waiting for her to leave like she always did. I didn't think it would be so easy to pretend to be asleep until 2:45 a.m. That's when she very slowly and quietly got out of bed. I watched her from the upstairs window as she got in her car and drove away. I went downstairs to look for any clues she might have left behind. I noticed I forgot to open the phone bill and something told me to for some reason. This time they included a list of outgoing calls from my wife's cell phone, 233 calls in that month alone to a specific phone number. I called it from my cell. A man answered wide awake, asking who this was. I told him my first name and asked if he was expecting a young woman, my wife's name, to arrive at his house in a few moments. He said yes, then asked how I knew that. I told him she was my wife and I was pretending to sleep in bed until she left the house. He was speechless. He said the woman he was seeing wasn't married. Just as he said this, I saw my wife's wedding rings by the kitchen. I told him if she brought in the 2 items I saw on the Amazon order, she was my wife and he was her AP. He said if it was true, he would dump her at the same time as me. He said he was getting too old to be playing games and thought she was a serious, respectable woman. I said if she's guilty of rape, then she is. She's not who we thought. My wife arrived there while he was on the phone with me. He just sat down the phone. I could hear her greet him like he was her lover. Then I heard her say she had 2 surprises for him. He gasped in a scared way when he saw the items were the same ones I mentioned. He wasted no time and told her he had her husband on the phone right now. He handed her the phone and I said, "Hey, honey, we're over." She squeaked and started crying against her will. She tried to say there was a misunderstanding, but we both waited with me on speaker for her to give an explanation, and she didn't know what to say. She tried saying she was planning to divorce me, which is why she started seeing this guy. I asked her if she told her AP about our 2-year-old daughter, and she did not. He said he had no idea she was married with a new child. He apologized to me, then broke up with her and kicked her out. She was screaming and crying, really freaking out. I couldn't understand what was happening, but the call was eventually dropped. Since she had a key, I moved the couch and other furniture in front of the doors to stop her from getting in. She tried to call me 13 times while I slept like a baby next to our 2-year-old. I knew I figured out what was going on, and it gave me so much peace, I was able to rest. Well, the next morning, the police showed up. They told me my wife spent the night in the car because she couldn't get in, even though she lived here. I got the lease, which was in my name. I told them what was going on, and they told her they couldn't force me to let her in because the place was in my name. She insulted them, asking them what their job was if not to help people, was surprised she took it out on them so much. She freaked out about her daughter being inside, and the cops refused to get involved with that as well. She went to her mom's house 2 hours away. They started figuring out what, if anything, they could do in her defense. Apparently, the evidence I had against her was more than enough to get better favor in the divorce and primary custody of our daughter. My ex had several boyfriends in quick succession, and it just made me extremely thankful that my daughter had a stable home environment with me. She started preschool and is doing great. She still sees her mom. I started dating someone but haven't introduced them to my daughter. I'm determined to be her stable, a father figure without other women coming in and out of our lives. Today's second story. In this story, Opie discovers his wife's inappropriate relationship with their butler, leading to his termination. Despite hiring a female maid, the butler returns, claiming the wife hired him back. She admits to an affair, justifying it as a job. The husband, hurt by the betrayal, ends their 30-year marriage and successfully moves on with his life, while the ex-wife and butler struggle financially, seeking his help in vain. Now let's get into the story. 10 years into our marriage, I became very wealthy thanks to the percentage of ownership I had in my father's company. So I bought my loyal and lovely wife a mansion for us to live in, which came with a butler who was prepared to take care of all the undesirable chores. My work schedule was pretty spontaneous because I could visit the office as I pleased or work from home. Our marriage and life together for the next 20 years after that were blissful other than some odd moments and occurrences. One day I arrived home from work to find the butler with my wife standing side by side doing dishes. She was drying the easier part, but I didn't understand why she was willingly doing any of the chores and standing so close to him. Their elbows touched a few times and I coughed to let them know I was there. My wife jumped, but he just moved away from her a little bit. She said she felt bad he was in here all by himself, so she wanted to keep him company and help a bit. She was so cheery and warm, I couldn't tell if she had any ill intentions. Another time, I came home to find her lounging in the pool with the butler, gardening and staring at her. They laughed a few times before I came out to greet them. It was clear that they were at least friends, but I didn't like how friendly they were. I thought I was just being controlling and jealous. So I accepted that my wife was friends with and cared about the butler. What was the harm in that if I trusted my wife of 17-ish years? At this point, we spent every moment I wasn't busy together. I loved her, and I could tell she loved me. Yet another odd occurrence was when I walked upstairs to find the butler closing our bedroom door. It had been hours since I was upstairs because my wife was still sleeping. It was odd, and I asked him if she called for him. He jumped when I spoke and turned around sheepishly, although I could tell he wanted to act normal. He stammered and said she called to ask him for some water. I accepted that for a moment, but reminded him that he was not to enter our bedroom or open the door. He didn't know what to say besides "yes, sir." He walked away quickly, and I opened the door to find my wife in her panties drinking water. I asked her if the butler saw her like that, and she said no. She just took off her robe. Again, I was skeptical. I was heavily considering hiring a new butler. It seemed like she was flirty with him at least, and I didn't like that he was most likely in our bedroom with my wife in her panties. Before I could terminate him, I saw him smelling my wife's panties. I know it's really bad, really ballsy. I caught him on the security camera. I told him that was unacceptable and made my wife really uncomfortable. I didn't even tell her about it. But when I told him she was uncomfortable, he instantly looked like he didn't believe me. That ticked me off. I told him he was fired. I hired someone else, this time a female maid. Since I knew my wife was straight, I decided that even if I was jealous and protective, it was a smart decision. 1 week later, I arrived home to find the maid outside gardening. I went upstairs and found the butler I fired coming out of our bedroom once again. Except this time he was dressed in regular but still kind of formal clothes. He looked at me like he was amused but inconvenienced because I was there and saw him. I asked him what he was doing in my house again, and he told me my wife hired him for something else. He said it with such nerve, all I wanted to do was punch his smug face. I told him to leave and not to come back no matter what my wife told him as he walked away. I went into the bedroom and found my wife wearing a skimpy little nightgown. I asked her what was happening, and she looked nervous. She said I was home earlier today than the week before, and I told her she always knew my schedule was spontaneous and not to change the subject. She turned red and told me I was freaking out over nothing. I asked her why she couldn't explain why she was here in her skimpy nightgown. After the butler I fired just came out of the room. She was pretty stunned and said she hired him back for things around the house the maid couldn't handle. I asked if one of those things was helping her with her personal plumbing and lubrication. Her jaw dropped, and she couldn't look me in the eye. Her cheeks must have been burning. They were so red it looked like blood vessels in her face were showing up. It was crazy. Her face never turned that red in all the 30 years we were together. She finally said in a weak voice that if he did help her with that, it was nothing against me. I told her that it most definitely was against me because she belonged to me. We were life partners, and only I was permitted to help her with her plumbing and lubrication. She said she wouldn't ask him to help her again and asked me not to worry about it anymore. I asked if that meant she was admitting to sleeping with him, and she was silent. She nodded yes, very minimally, with her eyes watering. Then she started speaking really fast about how it didn't matter. She just considered it a job, nothing meaningful that would take away from our marriage, and she needed me to forget about it so that nothing changed between us. I told her this was most certainly going to change things between us, and it already took everything away from our marriage. I told her we were over, called her a name, and told her to get out of my home. I was extremely careful to get a post-nup signed after I came into more money. It's not that I didn't trust my wife at the time. It was because my father and I were lawyers, which means I couldn't ever be made the fool. So my wife sorrowfully packed her bags. She had too many bags for someone with nowhere to go. The butler came up in the car he afforded with the paychecks I gave him. They stayed in a motel where the butler had been staying after I fired him. My wife had so many belongings, clothes that she had to leave some of it behind, which I immediately told the maid to sell on eBay or keep for herself. They stayed in that motel as long, but their money ran out without me signing the checks. They tried to contact me individually, blaming each other for what occurred and asking me to take them back into the mansion. It was gratifying that they were turning on each other and failing to survive or do anything with their lives. Even to this day, my ex still tries to ask me for help and gives me some updated sob stories about where she is in life. It is not glamorous. It's far from what she was accustomed to. With me, I've become something like Bruce Wayne in town, and I have no complaints. Even though her betrayal hurt, I knew from the moment I found out that I could recover from it, not because of my money, but because I know what love is. And it wasn't that.